He is the anti-Greta Thunberg, according to the New York Post. Also, you just testified in front of the Playing God with the Weather, a disastrous forecast hearings in September, I believe that was.
Correct. So Tuesday, September 15th.
Right. So I'm very glad that you joined us, Chris. You are quite the combatant. A lot of people say, oh, nuclear war, that's never going to happen. What's really dangerous are the chemtrails.
Well, that was the focus of Chris's testimony. Why don't we play a little clip of that to just show Chris? I think you said yourself you may be the youngest scientist to ever testify before Congress. Have you?
Yeah, I think I probably am. I don't know if I am, but I think I'm probably the youngest scientist to testify in front of Congress on a scientific issue.
All right, let's just show a few seconds of that. Since we have you here, we don't want to play it too much. Just a moment.
Now, contrails are line-shaped ice crystal clouds that form at altitudes above 20,000 feet behind jet aircraft. The exhaust from aircraft is primarily composed of invisible water vapor, CO2, and tiny particulates such as soot, which act as cloud condensation nuclei, which make it easier for water vapor in the air to condense onto those surfaces and form droplets, which then freeze and form these cirriform clouds that are artificial type cirrus clouds that resemble the feather-like clouds you see in the sky ahead of a warm front. Now, although contrails are definitely more common today than they were 30 years ago, that's largely because there's increased air traffic. And there's no compelling evidence that contrails are being deliberately created to alter weather patterns or block out the sun's energy, especially since contrails actually have a net warming effect on the planet.
So that hearing was about weather modification, geoengineering, a few different related topics, but your focus was to debunk that myth. And what I'm curious about is, did you pick that focus or were you asked to pick that focus?
I was asked to pick that focus. The House Republicans in the House Oversight Committee, well, the DOGE subcommittee, which is part of the House Oversight Committee, some staffers reached out to me and they said, hey, we're looking for a few expert witnesses to testify on behalf of this issue. And we got Roger Pilkey Jr., who I'm friends with, and I know his dad. So his dad's actually a meteorologist just like me, although he has a PhD in atmospheric science for 40 years, I think, or something like that at Colorado State University. And Pilkey's a political scientist, but he knows he's worked a lot with stuff about the IPCC, and he's done a lot of papers on hurricane damage and normalizing disaster losses in terms of an economic context, which are used to obviously which are used out of context to spread climate alarm and stuff. So he corrects that misinformation and sets the record straight. And given his work in climate policy and stuff like that, they brought him on as an expert witness. And his testimony was a little bit, was pretty much the same. All three of our testimonies, even the minority witness, we were actually very similar in terms of what weather modification is, what geoengineering is, what contrails are. But we did have slightly different focus on what our testimonies were about beyond that. And so Pilkey's was more about, recommending certain policies. Mine was about separating fact from fiction. And then Dr. McDonald's was basically to state why he supports, using geoengineering technologies.
So, Chris, is there a difference between geoengineering and weather modification? Is that?
Oh, yeah, there's a huge difference between them.
Could you explain that to me? Because I was kind of confused on that whole.
Yeah, so weather modification is the deliberate attempt to modify weather patterns, specifically through this mechanism called cloud seeding.
Like just like one occurrence? Is that you're talking about just like one occurrence, like on a particular day you want it to rain, so you modify the weather?
Yeah, so it's the intentional attempt to, and the federal government has not played us straight on that historically, but because they used to do different classified projects like Project Storm Fury, Operation Popeye, Project Cirrus, and once they tried to modify. In Project Cirrus in 1946, in 1947, they attempted to seed a hurricane off the coast of Florida. And when they seeded it, they didn't really notice any changes. And then the hurricane made a 135-degree turn to the west and struck Georgia, and that sparked a bunch of lawsuits. And then they were eventually dismissed when it turned out that, oh, well, hurricanes can do that naturally all on their own, which
Change
happened
direction.
in 1906. So it turned out that there was not really any evidence that seeding the cloud or the clouds inside the hurricane's eye wall did anything effective. And in Project Storm Fury, they seeded 4 hurricanes on 8 different days between 1962 and 1963 and 1982. And so, 1962 and 1983, I think it was a 21-year period. And then the results from that were inconclusive. And in Operation Popeye, that's a favorite one that a lot of chemtrail people like to talk about. And that also wasn't really effective. Now, the objective of cloud seeding today, it's not being done at the federal level that we know of. It's not in the budget. However, 9 state governments and local governments do facilitate projects, mostly out in the Intermountain West. There's no states on the East Coast that facilitate it. And then Florida and Tennessee obviously banned that last year and this year with different pieces of legislation, laws that were passed. So cloud seeding, essentially, what it is an intentional attempt to modify the weather through specifically cloud seeding, which involves injecting silver iodide dry ice, which is solid CO2, and so eventually the dry ice pellets sublimate into CO2, or they use salt particles to increase the cloud as once like a single cloud's make it more efficient at producing precipitation. And there are some studies that show that a single cloud may precipitate a little faster with cloud seeding, or it may enhance rainfall by up to 15%, but usually it's a lot lower than that. But it's very hard to actually test how effective cloud seeding is. And the reason for this is because the bounds of natural variability are so large that being able to detect a human influence on it through cloud seeding is extremely challenging to do. And you also can't really do a controlled experiment where you seed one cloud and you don't do the other. I mean, you can do that. The problem is that each cloud's different and will behave differently.
Well, whether or not it's effective is just one question. The other question, of course, is it harmful? On last week's episode, our guest was Sean Hibbler, the filmmaker for this documentary called Climate Trails that's on Amazon Prime now. And he's one of these guys who pushes the notion that the contrails that persist are chemtrails. And we basically pushed back pretty forcefully about that. But we gave him some love, so to speak, on the weather modification aspect. I think the film at least conveyed that there's a lot of weather modification going on. But before you comment on whether or not we should worry about it, let's show a clip from his film.
Continue tracking flights, and with this amazing group of people, I learned about the NOAA Library, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And they have a weather modification library where you can find all of the non-federal weather modification projects. So these are the smaller operations, the snowpack enhancement, the precipitation enhancement. Come to find out, there was a over 30-year-old project happening right over my head. And it was being paid for by 2 irrigation districts to the southwest of us, the Modesto and the Turlock Irrigation District, also known as TID. They call it Turlock Irrigation District. And I then learned the company that they were paying was called Weather Modification International, or LLC, or Inc. They use all 3.
Weather Modification Incorporated, which is a company that services most of the planet. They actually hold most of the contracts in the NOAA Library. The NOAA Library has every disclosed contract in the country, and there are thousands active contracts.
I realized that all of my documenting, all of the times I thought there was something going on in the sky, there it was confirmed.
The vast majority of weather modification, I believe, is conducted by military. But we have thousands of contracts with private companies like Weather Modification Incorporated. Anyway, if you go to their website, they offer loan programs for planes and they have job opportunities. And my favorite job opportunity is when they're requesting pilots. One of the qualifications is that they have the capability to be extremely discreet. They must have the ability to maintain secrecy and be discreet. That's in the open listing.
Yeah, as I said to Sean last week, her whole attitude is such that she thinks that's a huge disclosure that they want people to be discreet. The film doesn't contain a single piece of evidence connecting weather modification experiments to the persistent contrails, but it does convey that there's a lot of this going on, a lot of weather modification going on. Is that accurate, and should we worry about it in terms of maybe the harmful effects?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I was actually getting ready to segue right into that. So I want to just finish real quick with the distinction, and that is that obviously cloud seeding, we discussed cloud seeding, is to make clouds more efficient at producing rainfall, but it's very localized. So whether or not it's effective, we don't really know. Geoengineering, on the other hand, to Morgan's question, is the deliberate attempt to cool the planet to avoid global warming, catastrophic global warming, by injecting certain aerosols into the stratosphere. So we live from the surface up to about 13 kilometers is the troposphere. That's where all weather occurred. It's, you got vertical air moving up and down. The stratosphere is a layer above that. That's where the ozone layer is. It's very stable. So that's why you don't get you don't get any cloud formations, except for polar stratospheric clouds in the Arctic and Antarctic, which are made up of certain chemicals and stuff that have nothing to do with water. And that's why there's really no weather in the stratosphere. But if you inject sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, it reacts with oxygen and a little bit of water vapor up there to form sulfuric acid aerosols that block out the sun's radiation. And if it were to be scaled up, to a global level, that would actually probably cool the planet pretty significantly and lead to a whole bunch of bad things. Problem is, it's very expensive, and there's no documentation that is being done anywhere, really, at least on a federally funded basis. There have been private projects that have done it. University of Washington did it, and then they got shut down. So it's very expensive to do, but there should be a global non-use agreement on that because of acid rain concerns and ozone depletion, and just the fact that we shouldn't be using the planet as a test bed for experimental technologies. But back to the weather modification thing, regarding whether or not it's effective, probably not very effective. But we don't really know for sure because natural variability is so large. But there are some health concerns with seeding with silver iodide. There are some papers that have been published about this, about how when it gets into the soil, it can contaminate the water, and it can cause some problems with soil fertility and stuff like that. But more research needs to be done on that. But with dry ice, it's CO2. That's all it sublimates into. Is just gas, CO2, and then salt particles. That's not going to cause any problems either. So regarding to whether
what
or not
about aluminum? These activists in the film kept going on and on about
aluminum. Okay, this is my favorite argument, and I think Dane Wigington, whatever his name is.
He was on with Tucker. You answered
Carlson,
his.
Yeah. They like to talk about aluminum, and
who were you imitating? And that
was my Trump impression.
That was good. That was good.
That was
look at aluminum; it's quite bad.
That's actually a very good impression.
I can do a pretty good DeSantis impression too, but we'll save that for another time. But so whether or not it's bad or not, those chemicals probably not. But silver iodide should probably be looked at a little bit more. So I am fine with more oversight and some regulation and better transparency about that, because with regards to weather modification, even though at least in the United States it's not being done at a federal level, there are state governments that do it, and they are required by law. Private companies, if they have any state funded projects, they are required by law to report to NOAA, which is the thing that we just saw. And since 1999, there have been 1,113 weather modification projects, which is far more than I knew. Which shows that a lot of this stuff is being done without our knowledge, even though it is publicly available. People just don't, that's not reported. People don't look for it. So there should be better transparency with that. I do agree with that. As for the aluminum concerns, aluminum is the third most abundant element in Earth's crust by mass. It's 8% of the mass. So it should not be surprising that people find it in their water, or on their, in their soil or anything like that.
Because it comes from the earth.
Yes. Now,
remember that it comes from the earth. So if we take it up in the sky and drop it down, it's just going back to the earth.
Yeah. The other thing too is that there might be there might be too high concentrations of aluminum in some like rainwater samples that people have on their rain gauges and stuff. And you see people claiming that. And I'm sure that was what the other guy talked about too. We hear it all the time. It was on the Tucker's show. And the thing is that a lot of that stuff's probably just industrial byproducts that get from factories. It gets put up into the air and it gets blown downwind, and it can go for hundreds or thousands of miles.
So that's a legitimate problem. That's
it could be a legitimate problem, yeah. But it has nothing to do with what's coming out of aircraft. It has to do with just industrial pollution.
Right. I should ask you the question I asked Sean, because you're not a tinfoil hat dude. Do I need to worry about cooking with aluminum foil? Is that dangerous?
No.
Oh, good.
Don't put it in your microwave.
Yeah, don't put it in your microwave. I made that mistake when I was young.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned NOAA before, which actually the people who made this Climate Trails film, they seem to think it's actually a good source. But before we get to a quote as to what causes these contrails that's on that site, I wanted to ask you if you think, even though we know what your position is, that it's really contrails and these people are wacky, but I feel that the government has done a bad job debunking this myth. And here's an example. Here's what's on the EPA website. It says, now this isn't exactly wrong, but it's ridiculously vague. It says that the persistent contrails happen at high altitudes. It's caused by other atmospheric conditions, high humidity. It's the vaguest thing in the world. If we were arguing about like when water freezes, we wouldn't say, when it gets a little chilly out, it happens. We'd say it freezes at 32 degrees. It's the most obvious thing in the world. But the EPA website and the FAA website, which have been set up specifically to debunk this nonsense, just have this vague nonsense. And I had to dig and dig and dig to get to the NOAA website to get a more specific definition of when the contrails persist. And even there, they don't get too specific on humidity. Maybe they can't. But at least they say what the altitude is and what the temperature, when it happens. So I was saying to Sean, if they're not telling the truth, why don't you just document that the contrails are visible when the conditions are something other than what they say they have to be? That would be a pretty honest way to have the argument. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense, and I don't like the way the EPA has framed this website. I know Zeldin put it up, or his staff put it up to give people a peace of mind. But I think that they could have certainly done a better job with that. I'd be happy to volunteer if they want to hire me.
Yeah, because you're a smart guy and you're a scientist, but you also are a regular guy, I can tell. So talk to the audience. The audience aren't scientists, just regular people. Is that NOAA definition pretty good? Like something in just a couple of sentences that will clarify when we see the contrails and what causes
the NOAA article is much better, much more scientifically accurate. And I actually wrote an in-depth article on all of this stuff on my website, which is chrismartzweather.com, and it's the top article there on my website. And I go into the whole meteorology behind it. So condensation trails, which are the line-shaped clouds that you see in the sky that come out of airplanes a lot. Also called.
You're breaking up. What kind of? You do have a microphone or a built-in microphone?
I do have a microphone.
Your connection just got a little bit.
Shake it around or something. You got a bad connection with the microphone.
That's weird. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
Okay. So contrails, or they're also called vapor trails. Vapor is a misnomer because water vapor is invisible. You cannot see water vapor. You can't see any like gas. There's a couple gases you can see, but that's largely irrelevant because it's like CO2. You can't see it. This room that I'm in right now, the room that you're in, has water vapor in it. So clouds are made up of liquid, very tiny liquid water droplets that are condensed around very tiny solid particles called cloud condensation nuclei. And if they're frozen, they're ice crystals, but it's the same thing. So it's actually like solid or liquid water that you see. So vapor trails are kind of a misnomer. But anyways, they form from fixed wing aircraft. So we're talking about like airplanes or private jets, stuff like that.
Oh, your microphone.
Wait. There's something happened with your mic.
Can you use a microphone like built into your computer? Because the external microphone you have
somehow it's like a bad connection. While you're.
Do you know how to change it? If you go down to at the bottom, do you see where there's a gear wheel?
I got it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I'll get your volume up here a sec.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, come a little closer.
It's a little low. I don't know if you want to.
Okay, is that good?
Yes.
Yeah. You're not breaking up. In that sense, it's good.
All right. Okay. So these clouds form the lower. These clouds form.
Did you switch microphones?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, no, we're getting broken up.
Maybe it's an internet thing. It sounds like a microphone thing.
Well, his video.
I have full Wi-Fi, full bars, everything.
Sounds like a microphone thing.
Well, my laptop audio or laptop microphone is not that great, which is why I got this one.
See, what's happening is that the chemtrails are affecting his microphone as we speak. The chemtrails are in the room right now.
All right. Well, let's just keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So, is that better?
So far.
Kind of. I can hear it starting to break up again. But let's continue. We'll see.
Okay. So, so when jet fuel, so these clouds have nothing to do with weather, cloud seeding, or geoengineering. As I said, geoengineering is done in the stratosphere.
Yeah.
That's done where clouds don't form. So that's or it would be done theoretically. And I agree, geoengineering is bad. It shouldn't be done.
That's the playing God part, right?
Yeah, cloud seeding is done inside existing clouds, and you can't see it being done because it's inside of a thick cumulonimbus cloud or a wintertime orographic cloud over, Colorado, for example, where they try to increase the snowpack. So these clouds have nothing to do with that. So that's the first thing that the public should understand, is that we're talking about three completely separate things that have nothing to do with each other. So when jet fuel, we're talking about usually like kerosene or some other compound that's very similar to that. When it combusts, it produces byproducts like carbon, hydrogen, and little soot particles. Now, the soot acts as those cloud condensation nuclei because those cloud condensation nuclei, those tiny circles.
All right, I have an idea. Why don't you mute your microphone and call us on the phone? We'll watch you on video and we'll listen to you on phone. You got a pen and paper to write down the number, or you want to just start punching it in as I say it? Well, I can't hear you because you've muted it. But the number to call. There's the number. Look down there.
It's on the screen. For some reason.
Keep your video on, and we'll just do the audio from the phone. Am I a genius or what?
Well, we'll see. There might be a delay, so I don't know if that'll be just as.
Well, a delay is not as bad. Oh, here he is. That's a delay is not as bad as the audio we're dealing with.
Okay. Yeah.
I muted you, Chris.
What? I don't know why he's walking away. Then.
He's getting his phone.
He's already calling, or somebody's calling. Maybe it's not him.
All right, Jeff. While we're waiting, there was one thing that you were headed towards that you didn't say, which is that everybody's got to sign an NDA. Remember, they were going off on that NDA. You got to.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Do you have to?
But he was talking about. All right, Chris, is that you? Who's calling in? I don't know what your phone number is. Are you there on the phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, can you hold the phone up to your mouth?
No, he's got it.
Yeah, I got it on speaker.
All right, it'd be better if you hold it to your mouth.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
that's good.
It sounds good.
Okay. That's it good? All right. So when jet fuel, like kerosene, when it combusts, it produces these byproducts, which mostly include carbon, hydrogen, and some other particles like soot. And as I said, soot, these little tiny particles make it easier for vapor and air to condense onto. Because if we didn't have these big tiny particles in the atmosphere, that you can't see these things from the naked eye. They're so far up and they're so tiny. They're smaller than the width of a human hair. And these particles act to lower the saturation vapor pressure, which is a scientific way for the lay people. It's easier to just say that if we didn't have these particles, relative humidity would have to climb up to 400% in order to really get condensation. You have to otherwise, if we didn't have these particles, we wouldn't have clouds in the atmosphere. So for every let's see what we have here.
So for every kilogram of jet fuel, so kerosene, every kilogram of that produces 1.2 to 1.4 kilograms of water vapor and 3.2 to 3.4 kilograms of CO2. So it's about 1.65 times more CO2 that's produced. And so obviously our carbon dioxide emissions have increased a lot. And so therefore our water vapor emissions have increased a lot, which means that there's more vapor in the air to condense to form these clouds, which is why we see these clouds form more often than we did 30, 40, 50 years ago. There's just more air traffic, there's more people. But whether or not you see clouds will depend on atmospheric conditions. Right now I sound very vague like the EPA.
Yes.
But let me get into a little bit more detail here. So whether these ice particles form behind airplanes or not depends on just how close the atmosphere at that level, within that layer, or within that pocket, is to saturation. And we're talking the altitudes of 9,000 to 12,000 meters, which is about 30 to 40,000 feet. So that's just cruising altitude. Now, at saturation, that's how you get clouds to form. At saturation, the relative humidity is 100%. Just basic stuff that everybody can understand. And the air temperature also preferably needs to be about negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 40
All right,
Celsius.
hold it right there. You're saying that the specific humidity reading at which these contrails will persist is 100%, not 90%. Is that what you just said?
Correct. In order for any cloud to form,
okay,
you need the relative humidity to be at least 100%. Yes.
All right, because even the NOAA website, which is more specific than the FAA and the EPA website, even they don't say 100%. They just say high humidity. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what's wrong with these people. What you just said is pretty clear. 100%. 100%. Water freezes at 32 degrees, right? It boils at 212 degrees. Just fucking say it. What is wrong with these people?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff and I have gone around and around about this, and there is another thing with that NOAA website, which is different than something you said in your testimony, which is they say that these persistent contrails can last up to an hour. You said, and the conspiratorial people say, well, these can last for days. So which is it, and how is it? Because they say those long-lasting contrails are the things that are the spraying. That's what they say.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that they can last for days. There's new ones formed, but they can last for several hours. If the humidity conditions if the humidity's 100% and it stays that, or the temperature is at negative 40 degrees or lower. So, and it also depends on how close the atmosphere is to saturation to begin with. If the relative humidity, say, is 80%, so you have 80% relative humidity at 31,563 feet, let's just throw a random number there, and you're in that layer at 80% humidity, and the airplane flies through, and the water vapor it emits then condenses around. If the airplane flies through that layer and you emit the water vapor out through the exhaust, if the temperature is negative 40 or below, colder, 80% relative humidity, if you have just enough vapor to get it to 100%, you'll get a contrail. But if once the surrounding air mixes into it, because it's 80% relative humidity, it's going to fade really fast. But if the relative humidity is at 95% and you inject water vapor, you're going to get super saturation, which is over 100% relative humidity, and that contrail is going to persist for a lot longer, as long as the temperature stays negative 40 or lower. So if the closer the atmosphere at a specific layer, altitude in a certain layer, within a certain pocket in a column, if those conditions are satisfactory, the contrail can persist for several hours, and then it can spread out and cover a larger portion of the sky, before it eventually dissipates. But if the atmosphere is not that close to saturation to begin with, the contrail is going to fade pretty fast. And that's what I think people have a very hard time understanding that, just meteorology. That's the simplest way I can explain it.
Did the members of Congress, when you testified at the hearing, treat this as a serious issue, and was it conducted in an intellectually, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but as opposed to like so often with these things, it's theater. Was it legitimate the way they conducted the hearing for the most part, except for, of course, Jazzy Crockett, the flamboyant congresswoman in Ryan's home state? But otherwise, did they treat it seriously? And is it a legitimate issue, or is it such a tinfoil hat thing that they shouldn't even address it? What do you think?
Well, I think there are some legitimate concerns about weather modification technologies. There needs to be more transparency. There definitely needs to be. And, here's the thing is that people, conspiracies happen all the time. There are government officials or other people who conspire with others, or they do it themselves to do bad things. Happens all the time. And there are some conspiracy theories that I personally admittedly find interesting, but I won't get into that. But I think a lot of people kind of get behind is that there are certain political figures that have been assassinated. The government probably had involvement in it. That's a personal belief of mine, not my employer's, maybe not yours. That's just mine. But there are some conspiracies that are just batshit crazy that make no sense and just are. This is
like
one
fear
of
porn, maybe.
This stuff.
Well, we should actually say who your employer is, because these chemtrail kooks, they love to say, "Oh, don't trust the government," but your employer is not the government; it's a nonprofit.
No, we're NGO.
So it's CFACT. It stands for the Committee. What's the rest of it? For Constructive Tomorrow. Committee for Constructive Tomorrow. And there's the mission right there. Now, where do you get your money? That's a fair question. Not you. Where does the organization get their money?
We get it through a bunch of different organizations and stuff. A lot of conservative donors and stuff donate to us and other trusts and stuff. I actually don't know all of the answer to that. That's something that my boss would have to answer. But
right.
But we're pretty transparent about that. But it's not something.
It's on it links to what the whole.
But we do not receive government funding. We do not receive government funding.
Right. So Jazzy Crockett, let me just play a clip of Jazzy Crockett, because she seemed like she was trying to diminish the whole thing. She's such a lunatic. Watch this.
We've had a hearing on how the president is using the office to enrich himself and his family and friends. We could have had a hearing on how this administration is illegally stealing more than $400 billion in congressionally directed funds, but they'd rather distract you from the fact that their constituents are likely to die from their decision to cut health care and SNAP before some chemtrail conspiracy.
So basically she's saying it's not worth having this hearing, there's more important issues. Did you get that attitude from anybody else?
No, not really. I mean, I think that Representative Stansbury did to some extent, although she did have legitimate questions about the efficacy of cloud seeding and whether or not there are concerns. She's the Democrat from New Mexico who is the ranking member on that subcommittee. There were some Republicans that came in, and some of them were other hearings, and then they came and went. They didn't seem to care all that much. And then there were some Democrats that did the same thing. Jasmine Crockett being one of them. She came in, ran her mouth, about Trump. Trump's bad, Orange Man bad, Republicans are racist, stuff like that. Basically, minorities are affected by climate change, and then went away. She just made a fool of herself, as she usually does. But I do think that
she's not wrong about that point. See, that's the thing about people who act like assholes. Sometimes the assholes are right, at least to some extent. Isn't it true that in impoverished areas they often have the brunt of very harmful environmental effects, whether it's different kinds of pollution are in their neighborhoods more than in affluent neighborhoods.
Like Flint, Michigan, maybe you could use that as an example.
You can make that argument. Yeah. You can make that argument, but that's not really her. I don't think that's how her approach was.
Right. It's not enough to say therefore this hearing isn't worth happening.
Well, Stansbury actually made the point that that here you are having this discussion about weather, and she said at this same moment down the hall they're having a meeting about getting rid of the EPA, and you yourself found yourself in agreement with her on that point that, well, you do need a body that can actually regulate and investigate these kinds of things. So, I mean, that was sort of an interesting point that she made.
Yeah. I think that Congresswoman Stansbury What I liked about her, I don't agree with her climate change stuff, all of it. I think that she's kind of misguided on that. She's a little too far left on the issue for me. But I do think that she is very science oriented, and she actually had some follow-up questions for me, and I wrote an email that I'd love to sit down and chat with her about some stuff.
Well, does she use the metric system? We have one of our commenters saying they're impressed with you because you use the metric system. Does she use the metric system?
I saw that. Yeah. But she made a good point. I think that both her and Congresswoman Green made some good points about on different things. I think there was a lot of good points made between them and a lot of bad points. Congresswoman Green's good points were that we need stricter oversight on these things. We need to have better investigation into it, more transparency. Even if nothing bad's being done, I think that there should be more transparency. Because I don't fault people for not trusting the government. I don't trust the government as far as I could beanbag toss J.D. Pritzker. But it's just one of those things that I think that people need to have a better science education as well on.
Well, it looks like you're fond of one member of the government. Do you have her personal cell phone number is my question.
I do not. I actually, the reason I got this picture, I wanted to get one with Stansbury too, but she left the hearing before I had a chance to go up to her afterwards. She did come up to us before the hearing, though, but we were sitting down and we were getting ready to start.
Okay.
But I got to speak to Congresswoman Green, and the reason I wanted to was because, there are certainly some issues that she pushes that I agree with her on. This is one of those ones where I've always thought she's very kooky because she pushes the chemtrail stuff.
She does?
And I think she still does, despite the hearing. Yeah.
She didn't seem
It's the
to.
reason you had the hearing.
She didn't seem to in the hearings, actually.
Well, she did not, because she has posted about on Twitter in the past, about how the sky trails, the line clouds are evidence of that. And she seems to, and I think even recently she posted something about that, about how we need to have clear skies. Right. And when the reality is that weather modification doesn't really make the skies less clear. In geoengineering, you can't even see that because the aerosols are really tiny and are so far up.
See, this sort of makes me likes her even more. I already liked her because if that's her belief, she was still respectful and conducted the hearing like a professional.
So, another thing with her though, and it was with her social media feed's one thing, and that was just my impression of her. However, when I asked her staff to send me the bill called the Clear Skies Act, there's actually no mention of condensation trails or anything on that.
Well, maybe she believed it at one point. She's open to persuasion. It's an evolving position.
So I wanted to talk with her afterward, and it turned out she's much more open-minded than I thought. It was a completely different person than the media has portrayed her to be, than her social media postings in the past have led on. And I thought she was very open-minded. It was very surprising. And I thought she was probably the most interesting person there to talk to. That's why I got that photo, and I just wanted to tell her to thank you, because she's the one who had the hearing. So I wanted to make sure that I thanked her for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, she deserves
Stansbury, though.
I've heard from various people that she comes off as being a lot more intelligent in real life, too, than
when she's actually not dumb at all. Not dumb at all. She actually had very good questions that she asked people. And it really surprised me because, I don't hang around D.C. all the time, and I don't know any members of Congress. So my only impression of her is just what I've seen her post in the past, or what I've seen her on Fox or whatever. And I didn't think, and at least on this issue, I thought she was kind of crazy. But it turned out that my actual impression of her was misguided to an extent. But I think she had good questions, as I said. Stansbury, though, also had good questions, and she made an important point about why we should have an EPA. I mean, I think that the EPA is a mess. We definitely need, Zeldin's done a fantastic job, in my opinion, at clearing some of the cleaning house and getting the priorities straight with, improving air quality as opposed to focusing on the climate stuff, because there's a lot of uncertainties there as well. But we do need a body that that has some regulations on stuff. You can't just pollute the environment. I do think that there should be more state-by-state regulations, because The way that the atmosphere and the weather work, in California is a little bit different than the way it works in Alabama or Florida with things like ozone production, because certain trees produce naturally high amounts of ozone. And so so in certain states like Alabama, for example, there's a type of pine tree that produces tropospheric ozone. And here we exceed the EPA's limit naturally. And that makes it manufacturing. So like different car plants like Toyota and stuff. I think there's a Toyota plant in Alabama. Different manufacturers, they're very regulated by the EPA and where they can put up their plants. And so it makes industry very hard here. And these regulations were set based on what happens in California. But California, the ozone levels get that high because of pollution, not because of trees that naturally produce it. So there should be state by state regulations. But for more broad things like weather modification or for geoengineering experiments, there should be national oversight on that. And that's why having EPA is important. That's why I think that the Trump administration would be best to not eliminate it. But they could reform it in some regards. That's my stance on that.
All right, before we kiss you goodnight, why don't we try to get a couple of questions in from the audience? Somerville John, ask Chris if he knows anything about the deployment of solar shades in Earth orbit.
I don't know what that is, to be honest.
I think Bill Gates has pushed the idea of putting some reflective thing to reflect the sun away from the Earth. I think that falls into the geoengineering category.
Yeah, okay. So that, I don't know about putting stuff in space. I mean, I'm sure there's probably somebody that's proposed stuff. I know Elon Musk proposed something too recently about satellites to reflect radiation out using AI. But I know that there are people that do want to put like aerosol particles. Bill Gates has talked about that into the stratosphere to block out sun's radiation to cool the planet down to prevent dangerous global warming. But that's a terrible idea and it should not be done, which is why it was important to also have this hearing to discuss why that, we can debate about cloud seeding and, regulations, but the geoengineering needs to be completely off limits. There are some serious effects with that. Even the IPCC outlines that.
Well, it seems like with this conversation and the conversation that we had with our previous guest, that in both cases, the biggest issue would be that we would do something by accident, right? That in the case of geoengineering, we could screw up the Earth by accident. We could, go into nuclear war by accident. And people in a number of these cases, certainly on this case, they say, well, the government, NASA, NOAA, you can't trust the FAA. Everybody's in some big conspiracy. But, I think about a quick trip to the DMV. There's anything but organization. It's the most ineffective, inefficient, backed up system that is the government, state and federal government right now. So I think your point is well taken, and that the conspiracy tinfoil hat gang might be just, getting into some fear porn or something like that to make some bucks. I'm not exactly sure what it is. But for my part, Chris, thanks.
I think Chris's phone got disconnected, right? Chris,
yeah, it said his phone died.
Yeah, my phone died.
But there you are.
Yeah.
All right, Chris.
Your phone died. All right. Well, so we got you on the computer now.
For a second, for a bit. Yeah, he's a little bit broken up there on the audio.
All right. Let me ask you the most important question. It's a little bit off topic, but I think I'm not the only one who wonders about this. Since you are a meteorologist, you could probably clarify this. What's the difference between partly sunny and partly cloudy? And what's the difference between mostly sunny and mostly cloudy?
It's a good question, and that's not one I actually have a completely honest answer for. I think that it's just mostly terminology. But I'd say partly cloudy means, from my interpretation of it, because believe it or not, this is not something that we actually really talked about when we learned meteorology and atmospheric science. We focus more on the equations of motion and stuff. But this terminology is, a lot of it's just arbitrary. But I would say that partly cloudy means that you might have like 30 to 40% cloud cover, and then mostly or let's see, partly sunny would be you have 40 to or 30 to no 60 to 70% sunny skies. I guess that means the same thing when you think about when you do the math. It's just a
It
choice.
sounds like a very wordy way of saying you don't know.
I don't know. I actually don't know. I think
That's fair. That's fair.
It's a terminology that broadcasters just use randomly.
Is the glass half full or half empty? Right.
50-50, half right.
Same kind of thing. I would say so.
All right. Well, thanks for spending time with us. We appreciate it. You're a cool dude in a loose mood.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to get you
All
back.
right.
Maybe we'll get a debate.
Oh, yeah. Well, before you go, seriously, has there ever been any debate between one of these chemtrail kooks and one of you guys who thinks they're kooks? Of course,
I don't know if there has been. I know there have been people that have challenged others. I know meteorologists like Matthew Capucci at the Washington Post, who has the same view as I do on this whole geoengineering weather modification thing. We disagree on climate. He's more alarmist.
Well, are you a person who would be willing to have such a debate?
I would consider it. Yeah. As long as it's moderated, it doesn't get heated. I think.
How about if we do it here? How about if I go back to Sean Hibbler and say either him or find somebody on your team, so to speak, and I've got Chris Martz, who's willing to debate. You got anybody?
Yeah.
And let's do it.
Yeah, I would be willing to do it. I debate people online all the time. Problem is that most people that I debate on any topic are bad faith actors that don't debate fairly. And so that's why I think it's important to have a moderated debate, where we can talk back and forth, like not so moderated like the presidential debate was, where, the presidential candidates can't talk to each other. Obviously, me and Sean should do that, but just to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand, there's no insults or anything.
No, you're right. You're right. We can do that. We might be drinking a lot of wine, but we know how to keep things under control. We can't keep our own drinking under control, but we can keep the conversation.
Yeah, I'd be willing to do that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And again, you are the anti-Greta Thunberg. In this case, that's a good thing. She's only, 19 hours, you said? 19 days older than you?
Yeah, she was born on January 3rd. She's
okay,
a few days
so there you
older
go.
than me.
How dare you? How dare you?
She's stolen my future.
Yeah, we want to get your other impressions the next time too. That was a great Trump, and you said you do DeSantis as well.
I can do DeSantis. Yeah.
Say good night as DeSantis. Come on.
You're in the state of Florida. We're going to say good night. Got to stop the wokeism here in Florida.
All right.
I don't know about you, Morgan Ryan, but this guy is my favorite meteorologist ever.
All right. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Hope to get you again on sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks
for having me.
Thank you.